Welcome, pollinator ambassadors, to the Bee's Knees Cafe. You're about to get served facts. These pollinators play a huge role in what ends up on our plate. Have you ever heard that pollinators are responsible for 1 out of every 3 bites of food that you eat? As pollinator ambassadors, we like to talk about how pollinators shape our diets. But this 1 in every 3 bites of food deal, how does this affect what we see on our plates?
Yeah, I think that fact is a little too hard to picture. Today, we're getting personal and visualizing it with examples from common meals. But first things first, let's talk about a cool thing called pollination. Pollination happens when pollen is moved so it can fertilize an ovule. When fertilized, the ovule becomes a seed. Whether a plant needs pollen moved within their own flowers or from across the garden, they all need help moving the pollen. Plants get help from wind, water, or animals to move that pollen and form those seeds.
Speaking of seeds, in case you didn't know, almonds and other nuts are seeds. Often we focus our eating on the parts of the fruit that surround the seeds, but fruits are just delicious coverings for seeds, like apples. In an apple, you can see the ovary and the seeds in the core.
Okay, back to the food. Let's take a look at some of our favorite ones. Remember those almonds we talked about? If there were no pollinators, what would be left on this plate?
No bees, no almonds. We would have an empty plate. To produce nuts, almonds need insects to move pollen to a different almond plant of a different variety. How about this plate? It's that apple we mentioned earlier.
Another empty plate. Most apple varieties need insects to move pollen between trees of different varieties. Also, without enough pollen, we would have some pretty oddly shaped apples. No pollinators, no food. Pretty simple, right? Hold on, we're about to get complicated. If there were no pollinators, what would be left on this plate of salad? Right now, I see lettuce, avocado, and tomato. Now, I'm not really a salad guy, but that's looking scrumptious.
Without pollinators, we would have just a plate of lettuce. The leaves of lettuce don't need pollination to grow, and most lettuce is self-pollinated, meaning it doesn't rely on pollinators to set seed to make more lettuce plants next year. But tomatoes and avocados do need pollinators. Those tomatoes can only be pollinated with a technique called buzz pollination. The bee vibrates its body, causing the flower to spew pollen onto the bee and into the flower. Only some bees, like bumblebees, can do this. Other foods that rely on buzz pollination include kiwis, blueberries, and cranberries. Getting even more complicated, how about this plate? Bread, butter, and jam. We know fruit production depends on pollinators, but what about wheat and dairy?
Most grains, like rice, corn, and wheat, are actually wind-pollinated. Unlike nuts, fruits, and some vegetables, they don't need insect pollinators to grow. Okay, so we definitely have some bread, but what about butter?
Bees pollinate important animal forage plants such as alfalfa, which is a plant that cows eat. If they can't eat their alfalfa, then that impacts dairy and meat production. So dairy cows need pollinated plants to eat and produce milk so we can get butter. So what are we left with? Just plain toast and a little bit of butter.
How about coffee?
Coffee needs help from pollinators too. Coffee flowers are sometimes able to pollinate themselves, but insect pollinators improve production by 25%.
Without insect pollinators, that sounds way too expensive. How will I get through my day without coffee?
Luckily, I don't drink coffee. But what about cranberry juice?
Without insect pollinators, we would have very little cranberry juice. Cranberry fruits mostly rely on insects to move pollen and buzz pollinate. They can produce some fruit if the pollen just moves around in the same flower, but not nearly as much.
I see. This does get more complicated when you start talking about plant biology. Okay, so what about a staple in the American diet? Pizza. I see tomatoes, green peppers, and cheese on the crust in this pizza. Would it all disappear too?
It would just be a sad little pizza topped with extra sadness without pollinators. We already talked about tomatoes, so those are out. And peppers need help from pollinators too. We would still be able to get some milk from cows to make the cheese like we mentioned earlier, and we would have the crust, of course, because that comes from a grain, which is wind pollinated.
What about foods that are more common in other parts of the world? Are there any foods that aren't impacted by pollinators?
Yeah, rice and beans is a good example. Since rice is a grain, it is wind pollinated. Many beans are self-pollinating as well, so without pollinators, we would still have rice and beans at least.
What about my sweet tooth? What would be left in this bowl of strawberries without pollinators? I really love strawberries.
Well, without pollinators, we would still have some strawberries, but they would be really small, squishy, and oddly shaped, the ones you don't really want to eat. Strawberry flowers need pollinators to move pollen so the entire flower can be pollinated, giving us big, juicy, delicious strawberries. Not only that, but pollinators don't just pollinate the strawberries we grow to eat. They also pollinate tiny wild strawberries that are native plants. These wild strawberries, along with other wildflowers, sustain countless creatures in the ecosystem, filter water, and help build soils.
Wait, are we still talking about food?
Yeah, the relationship between flowering plants and their pollinators is the base of a food system that feeds a myriad of animals, including us. After all this, I'd have to say I'll be appreciating my meals a whole lot more, and the pollinators that pollinate them, of course.
And I'll be making sure that people know how important pollinators really are. Remember, 1 in every 3 bites of food was created by a pollinator, but those pollinators depend on pollinator ambassadors like you.
We have the power to make a difference in our planet, pollinators, and our food, and it all starts with you.
Thanks for watching. We hope that you thank a pollinator the next time you eat.